Hi there and welcome to JLB Track tutorials. Environment Register. JLB Track is used to record and maintain a register of environmental impact assessments in the Environment Register screen. Whenever a new environmental impact is identified, a new environmental impact assessment is to be conducted. From the main taskbar, select Safety and Environment, then Environment. To add a new environmental assessment to the Environmental Aspects and Impacts Register, select New on the top toolbar. A new environmental impact assessment will appear. For simplicity, however, today we'll be looking at an existing record. Complete the preliminary information by adding a description of the environmental impact or the potential change and harm, adding which aspect group, adding the specific environmental aspect or activity, selecting which department the environmental impact is relevant to, adding the operational area where the environmental impact is located, adding date raised, which defaults to the current date but can be changed to when initiated, and finally adding responsibility using the drop-down field. Environmental impacts are never closed. The potential will always exist. Consequently, all environmental impact assessments are displayed on the Environmental Aspects and Impacts Register and are regularly reviewed. For reviewing, add date reviewed using the drop-down field, add review frequency in months using the drop-down field, and in new review, the date will automatically be populated from the review frequency. Once the preliminary information of the environmental assessment has been added to the Summary tab, the new environmental impact assessment may be saved by closing the page, saving when prompted. The person or team who's responsible for assessing the environmental assessment should then be advised of the new EIA. This may be completed by printing or emailing the EIA by selecting the option on the top toolbar. To assess the potential risk without a control implemented, refer to the company's risk assessment procedure and select the likelihood of it occurring, select the consequence of the hazard. The level of risk will then be automatically populated. Please note the likelihood and consequence should be mapped against the level of risk in configuration from the company's risk assessment procedure. The company's risk assessment process can be linked to JLB Track as a PDF document. It will appear whenever Risk Help is selected. This will allow descriptions of the various likelihood, consequence, and risk criteria to be described. Then continue with the initial risk assessment by adding whether the environmental hazard has any legislative or regulatory impact, selecting whether the environmental impact is an actual or potential impact, selecting whether this is a past, current, or future impact, enabling significant, if the risk is significant, enabling the company complies field if the company is complying with the respective legislation or regulation, adding any interested parties external to your company, and adding if there's any quantitative data available on the environmental hazard. The controls or preventative measures to reduce the risk are then determined by adding the control that's been determined, adding if any further environmental monitoring is required, and undertaking another risk assessment to determine the resultant risk using the drop-down fields for likelihood and consequence, designating the person who has the responsibility for taking the action using the drop-down field, select the date the action was taken using the drop-down field, and describe the action taken. At any time, the occasions when and why the EIA was reviewed can be viewed by selecting Review on the top toolbar. This concludes our tutorial today on the environment.